Happy New Year, everybody. It's Lee Caraher, CEO and founder of Double Forte. And we're going to start a whole new video series this year in 2023. So I thought I'd kick it off by talking about the last 20 years. 20 years, Double Forte's been around for 20 years, which was, when Dan Stevens and I started this company oh so long ago. I'm not sure we had that thought in mind, but here we are. And I thought that the most important thing was to sort of, when you hit these big milestones, is to reflect and project, because we don't want to just rest on our laurels. We want to make sure we are taking the learnings that we have from the past and moving them forward. Because if you're not relevant, it doesn't matter. All right. So just a little background. I started Double Forte 20 years ago with my friend and at that time, former colleague, Dan Stevens. And we had a need, right? We needed to earn some money. I am the breadwinner in our house. And I did not want to start a firm in a soul-sucking way. I did not want to have the way we do business, the way we as an agency, to be such a soul-sucking activity that I just couldn't bear it. And my conviction, not our conviction, Dan and I have the same conviction, that communication is the most important skill and discipline in business and in personal life. We opened up our doors in basically what was a closet in Ghirardelli Square. First, we started in my basement in Millbrae, California, and that did not work because I was easily distracted by my young children. So we got this literally a closet in Ghirardelli Square. We didn't let anybody come visit us because they wouldn't have fit. But we're in Ghirardelli Square. We'd come to you. We'll come to you. And we were determined to work only with people that we liked, people who are doing good things in the world, and companies who are trying to make a positive change, even if it was just a small positive change in their vertical. And the other goal was to get home by 6 o'clock on Friday every week, because Dan and I had we had worked together twice before, once at Sega of America for 5 years, and then once at Red Whistle in the Interpublic group of companies. And we never really got home by 6 o'clock on Friday. I'm like, wouldn't it be amazing if we could get home at 6 o'clock on Friday? So those two things: work with good people doing good things, do it in a way that's not soul-sucking, and get home. Three things, I guess, and then be home by Friday. Those were the three basically goals for the business. So Dan has since moved on. He was a boomerang. So he started the company with me, and then a few years later, he left the company to pursue something else. And then he came back as an employee, and then he left again. And he was at Fleishman Hilliard as the grand poobah of consumer PR at this, Fleishman, very well respected international PR firm. And then he left there and he started a donut company, Bliss Bomb, which I cannot recommend highly enough. These donuts are baked, not fried. They are wonderful gifts. They do seasonal flavors every quarter, I guess every season. If you're in New York, they're doing lots and lots of catering. Anyway, regardless, go to blissbomb.com, buy some donuts. They're awesome. My favorite is the pink champagne. There's the logo right there, blissbomb.com. Anyway, so he has left. But I have earned a living many times over for 20 years, and all of our employees have earned a living, a good one, I think, for as long as they were with us. And I've been able to look myself in the mirror every single day and say, yeah, we did it good. We're doing good. We are not contributing to ill. The companies that we're working with are doing good things. They're trying. They have good intention. If they screw up, they own up to it. We help them do that. We help them achieve their goals. And so every night I know that we're happy I'm happy with the way we treat our people, their clients, and what we're doing for them in the world, and the impact that it's having in the world. And then I've been able to get home on Fridays, or right now, turn off by 6 o'clock, 97% of the time for 20 years. It wasn't quite 20 years before that, but for 20 years, I've gotten home before 6 o'clock or turned off by 6 o'clock on Friday, 97% of the time. So really, frankly, mission accomplished, right? But so much has changed over those 20 years, right? So much has changed. Also, so much has stayed the same. And you know the old adage, the more things change, the more they stay the same. But I think there's some things that are very fundamental. The function of strategic communication hasn't changed, right? Our function is to engage and inform an audience, to get in a relationship with people on behalf of a client, or a client, a company, a person, an organization, so that company can achieve their business goals, right? That's stayed the same. What else has changed? Everything else. Some things have gotten more pointed, more honed, more important. Some things have changed dramatically. So I thought I would just go through. I mean, there's lots of things. I'm not going to talk about them all. I'm going to talk about the main things. So what has changed over 20 years? How we communicate. So back in the day when I started my career, so many years ago in Boston, we used Wang computers, and we did not have email. That's how old I am. And basically you did press releases, you put them in a mail, all the coordinators would get together, we'd all be in a row, we'd all be helping each other out, we'd send things out. FedEx was pretty new. If you FedExed it, it was a big deal. And we faxed things. And then what did? We picked up the phone. I don't even have a landline anymore. I mean, oh my gosh, right? But really, we would fax. If it was an important press release that had to go to a certain time, the coordinators, we would all go to the different faxes in the company, and we had intercom at that company at the time, Cohen Communications, and then the Weber Group, and we would all line up, and someone would come out the intercom and go, okay, 3, 2, 1, go. We couldn't even program the fax machine. Some people are going to look at this and go, what the hell is a fax machine? Anyway, but we fax, we FedEx, we mail, and we pick up the phone and we'd call people. I know it sounds very strange, right? But now today, nothing has changed more than communication. The number of ways to get to people, the number of, when's the last time we wrote a memo? Now we write memos upside down, right? We used to write a memo that was very expository. Here's the issue. Here's my thoughts. Here's the conclusion. Here's the next steps. Now we write an email or a memo, which is, here's what we're going to do, and here's the background, right? Just think about that upside down in terms of how we communicate today, so that we can have people even have a chance of understanding what we're trying to do, right? We have the ability to talk to so many people. We never had the, really everything. If you wanted to talk to a lot of people, you had to go through broadcast media, which is why in coup d'etats, getting the television stations was the most important thing, right? Because then you could communicate the people you were overtaking. Still important, but not as important as it used to be, for sure. Also, coup d'etat, let's not do that. And this is not new, right? Communications changed over 4,000 years. Finally, my degree in medieval history is playing out. It's only 2,000 years old, but still, tablets, talking, hand signals, the book, Gutenberg Press, obviously seminal change in communication. However, if you think about all the things that have changed communications and styles and mediums, although they've obviously changed in the last 4,000 years, it has just exponentially exploded in the last 20 years. McLuhan, famously said, the medium is the message. If you haven't read his book on the media, I highly recommend it. But if the medium's the message, there are dramatically more permutations today than when he published that in 1964, right? I mean, so many. And which leads me to number 2, social media. Social media, it's a shit show, right? Let's just say it out loud, right? But it's also an incredibly powerful, and I'm just talking about it in general, not the different platforms, medium. being able to, and now everybody is their own media platform if they want to be, right? The, FedExing still around, faxing not so much unless it's electronic. Although it is still very, faxing your representatives still works, and still calling actually helps, right? Please pick up the phone. But now it's like a complicated web of platforms, the different languages and the different best practices the different platforms use, modes, dark mode, light mode, asynchronous, synchronous, the whole thing. And the best practices for each of these platforms change all the time, depending on those businesses' goals. Plus email and texting and DM and chatting, and FedExing and mailing stuff, snail mailing. We call it snail mail now because it's not email. And picking up the phone also still works, right? When we started Double Forte, before Twitter, before Facebook, before LinkedIn, and all these other companies that have fundamentally changed the way people, communities, businesses, governments, politicians communicate. We started the company before that, and now our business obviously is, we don't have a strategy that doesn't include a social media element to it, right? I'll give you a little perspective. So today, LinkedIn has 875 million people on that platform. I am member 9,384 on LinkedIn. And I was like, this thing's not going to live. Because, I was in Silicon Valley and I've never been an early adopter. I've been a next adopter. And I finally got cajoled to being on LinkedIn. I don't remember why, but I was under the 10,000 mark, right? So I technically now, I guess I was a very early adopter. At the time, I was not, right? And the impact of social media means that, many things, but Double Forte has had to relearn and learn and relearn again how to communicate most effectively for ourselves, for our team, for our clients, with our clients, on behalf of media, all that kind of stuff, probably 9 times, it's like a cat, right? 9 times over, learning and relearning. So the concept of lifelong learning is not new, but truly, if you are in business and you are not relearning how to do things all the time based on what's happening in the world around you, you are irrelevant, right? And we've had to really double down, triple down, like everybody else, on understanding what is the most effective way to engage and communicate with and be in relationship with people on behalf of our clients. So many times. The media. This is very sad, right? This is very, very sad. The, media is, I would argue today, much more important. Traditional journalistic media is much more important today than it was 20 years ago. And 20 years ago was the most important thing. PR used to mean media relations, even though it wasn't, right? Technically, that's not true. But that's what people thought. All we did was pick up the phone and call the media and get stories placed. That's how it works. It's not how it works. But that was our biggest tactic, right? There are lots of different things that we did, always, all professional communicators. But the biggest tactic was media relations. And if you want a good PR, if you want a good media, to call, a PR firm or get PR people, right? So that is still true, but actually with social media, the media has been totally disintermediated, and may or may not be orchestrated, frankly, thing, right? But it's a shit show. It's a shit show of paywalls, sponsored posts, misinformation that may or may not be coordinated, influencers. And so that real journalists who are trained and who know how to, who are trained in journalism, finding out facts, presenting facts, not opinion, which is not the same thing as a contributor or editorial, right? They have to, break through all this other noise of everyone having their own media platform, right? So in order to be relevant, to be watched, to be profitable, and that is the key right there, profitable. Media is very challenging to be profitable in if it's just about the news. And unless it's about sports, right? If you think about small town papers, they exist on sports. They exist on small town sports because that is the only thing that has to be live. Everything else can be that and politics. When votes happen, those things are live. Not very many other things are, except unless you're publicly traded and the stock's tanking. So in a world where everyone has their own media platform, I would argue that journalism is actually more important. And finding ways for real journalists to get heard, be seen, break through the noise, and not be suppressed by sort of flooding the zone with misinformation is the most important thing we can possibly do. I could talk for days about the role of journalism versus information entertainment, because there's a lot of information and entertainment going on in news, and critical thinking. We need to be critical thinkers in the population in order to discern among all these things that are coming at us. Anyway, so that's changed. And the last thing, the big thing in our business, in the business of PR, when we started Double Forte, when I was started in PR, and it's probably a little into it, chief communications officers, they may not have been called that, but you really saw them in government and you saw them in the military, right? So, and I remember watching Margaret Cutweiler, who was the chief spokesperson for the Department of Defense. I think it was probably under Reagan or Bush. She was an elder stateswoman, and she's just a badass, right? And then, fast forward probably 25 years to Jen Psaki, who was less than 40, and another badass who was the chief spokesperson for President Biden. But that's really where you saw them. You saw them in politics or in the military. Now, chief communications officers are everywhere, right? And they are not just responsible for what used to be, think of PR, media relations, right? They're responsible for strategic communication platforms, crisis communications, sales and channel communications, influencer relations, customer service strategies, recruiting and retaining strategies, thought leadership, social media strategy, implementation. And all these things that I just mentioned are so much more important to the mix than they were. Well, some of them didn't exist 20 years ago with social media, but the whole balanced program is what you'll see much more often in a PR program. And in so many places, that chief communications officer either exists in the title or in the function and has moved into the C-suite. So PR has moved from, I would say the bottom, but maybe it wasn't the bottom of the marketing rung, right, to the very top in many, many places. And the easiest way to see how important communications has become is to count how many CCOs there are at the table across industries, big companies, small companies, publicly traded companies, private companies, who are trained, experienced, and who are not subjugated to the CMO, but side by side, because they're very different disciplines, they're very different purposes, and they should be in concert, right? So basically in 20 years, the CCO has become a thing, it's become an actual title, a position that, boards are like, who's your CCO? I mean, I've done that. I've been in those conversations so many times. Lee, we need to find a CCO. Who are we going to get? And I never would have imagined that 20 years ago. So that has changed to the better, right? To the better for our profession and for the businesses that hire these people. Today at Double Forte, we act like that CCO very often, particularly in times during transition, where what is going to happen, how to message, how to make sure it's understood is so important. Many times if a client doesn't have a CCO, we'll go in for a defined period of time and fill that role through that transition. Okay, those are the big changes, right? How we communicate, social media, the media, and the rise of the chief communications officer. And then what's more true today? What's still true, right? when we started Double Forte, we actively said, we're not going to do crisis communication. And one of the reasons we decided not to do crisis communication, which is very profitable, is because it does not happen at Monday at 10 o'clock, right? So if our goal was to get home by Friday at 6, there's no way we could be, a known crisis firm, because crisis happens around Friday around 4:30 p.m. or Saturday around 10 a.m. It does not happen at Monday at 10 a.m. However, social media changed everything, right? And now crisis communications is a fundamental part of, we always did it, but we didn't talk about it really. But then that was a fundamental offering of our business in our work. And planning for crisis is still critical for every business. And I would say even more critical because of the speed of which things happen, right? Just this last week, you can think about Southwest, or 2 weeks ago, Southwest with the total breakdown of their airline and being able to get planes in a certain place, that, and clearly they had a plan that didn't really go very well. Kind of thing. But basically, you need to have a crisis plan for every business, big and small, and then do the work that if this, then that scenarios, and actually think the worst thing possible. You need to think the worst thing possible so that when something bad happens, you have a playbook that you can adjust from. That nothing is so critical, so critical. And it really, so the Southwest thing, brought it home again, but that is, that happens, right? It happens a lot in air travel. Traffic happens, planes losing their luggage happens, weather happens, it happens a lot. When people call me with a crisis, the first thing I say is, did anybody die? Usually the answer is no. Then the next question is, could anybody die? And 90% of the time, the answer is no. But just by asking those two questions, that puts the crisis in context, right? That drives a stake in the ground of the level of crisis we're at. And not that a crisis isn't a crisis, depending on the situation, but you should measure your results, measure your action, measure the severity or the acuteness of the reaction, based on that. Did anybody die or could anybody die? Truly. And that lets, usually that person who's called me, they may be panicked, they may be under the gun, they may be, I don't know what to do, that's why they called us. And it helps them understand that where they sit in that DEFCON 5 number, right? And we always act urgently, but did anybody die? Could anybody die? Helps put it in perspective, right? And I watched the Bengal Brown game a few days ago. I was first of all, so concerned about Damar Harris, obviously. But the fact that, it's clear that whoever needed to know what the crisis plan was, didn't know what the crisis plan was. Because I really don't imagine that these people didn't think about it. But let's just say for a second that no one had ever really imagined that someone could die or be near death on the football field. Really. So let's just talk about what happened, right? So in this game, in the first quarter, Damar Hamlin suffered a cardiac arrest after being hit, sort of confluence, just the perfect storm of things, right? And he goes down. The whole country's watching on live, not the whole country, but, people are watching on live television, right? And 9 minutes, it was 9 minutes of CPR that Damar had, right? So first he goes down and then everybody comes on. So it's really not until like minute 3 or minute 2 that they're doing this. And then 9 minutes of CPR. And then he didn't get off the field for 16 minutes. And a lot of it you couldn't see. So it was on live television and they were, going off and going to break and all that kind of stuff. But it was 9 minutes we saw that. And we did, the Bills players and then the Browns players, they sort of surrounded DeMar, so that you couldn't see it. It obscured the cameras, and the cameras pulled back, which was the right move, for sure. But they surrounded so that no one could see what actually was going on. You could see it in their faces. You could see in the other players' faces how serious it was, right? He was removed from the field 16 minutes later from when it started. And then the game was actually ended more than an hour later on live television. And again, I can't imagine that the comms team didn't have this plan, right? Particularly after what happened in the Premier League just a year ago. So the Premier League, which I'm a huge devotee of, it actually wasn't in the Premier League. It was during the Euros, and a Premier player, Christian Eriksen, who plays for Denmark, top Premier League player in the world. He had a cardiac arrest during the Euros, and he did not have, he was revived much faster, and he waved people goodbye, but it was a different scenario, but he had a cardiac arrest on the field. If that isn't a trigger for every sports league in the world to go, we need a plan if somebody has a cardiac arrest on the field, and someone might die, right? I can't imagine that the NFL comms team didn't pay attention to this. I just can't imagine. But they didn't escalate it, or they didn't have the credibility, or they didn't have the right answer. Because really what it should have, in my experience and in my opinion, should it be, could somebody die after CPS starts? Could somebody die? Could he die? Yes. Call the game right there at minute 3. Call the game. Because life, as Booger, who is in commentary in studio, life's more important, right? Life's more important. And I don't really care what NFL said they did. I don't believe it. But they should have called that game at minute 3. Minute 3. It's a total failure on their part, particularly in a time when we're talking about head injuries and the violence of, that's what they call it, the violence of football, and how many people get hurt. And the only reason DeMar Harris actually had a job, was starting that day, was because earlier in the season, the guy he replaced got hurt, his very good friend. He got hurt and had to be taken off the field, so he got the job. So why, this should not have been a surprise, right? It's so terrible. And I can't wait till this man wakes up and realizes how much money has gone into his GoFundMe for his charity, over $6 million. So wonderful. But that's a failure. And on good thoughts. Number 2, right, on what is still the same. Focus is your friend. Focus is your friend. In a world where there's so many options, focus is an even bigger friend than it was 20 years ago. I've been saying focus is your friend for over 20 years. And it's even a better friend today than it was when we started the company. It is still better to do one thing well than to do multiple things poorly. I usually say better to do one thing well than do other things crappily. I'm not sure that's a word, but you're going to get more meaningful traction if you do one strategy done well than if you have lots of different initiatives and do them half-assed or they're under-resourced. Period. The end. Focus is your friend. Focus, focus, focus. And the other piece is, we always say the truth will come out, right? The truth will come out. And today, the truth will come out even faster than it did 20 years ago, right? Mark Twain is credited with saying, if you tell the truth, you don't have to remember anything. It's very useful not to have to remember, oh, wait, I lied to that person. What did I say? I got to lie to that, what? And then you get a new person in the mix and you can't keep it all straight. And how many companies and how many people and politicians have come down because they lied? You can't even count that high, right? Obfuscation is harder today. And if someone wants to unravel a falsehood, and just assume that someone is out there trying to unravel your falsehood, they can. And then they can make that falsehood public on their own platforms. And keep at it, keep at it, keep at it. And then that will have a pressure, right? And the potential for a falsehood to go around the world is faster than a good thing to go around the world. That's for sure. It's the blink of the eye. It's absolutely the blink of the eye. More and more people are demanding that the companies they purchase from, use, put in their mouth or their bodies, services they contract for are good, right? Are businesses that act and do well. that are trying to get better. This is not going to change. This trend is only going to go up. It's not going to go down. Please lie to us. No, it's not going to happen. It's going to go up, right? And people want the truth, and then people want to align themselves more and more. People want to align themselves with companies that match their own values. I really hate the concept of cancel culture, because particularly since the people who talk about cancel culture were the ones who started it, they just don't like it when it goes on them. It reflects badly on them. I don't think anyone expects perfection. No reasonable person. Okay, so they're outliers. No reasonable person expects perfection, but we do expect the truth, right? And we do want you to keep trying to improve, right? And if you do that, your business will succeed faster and it'll be cheaper. It is so expensive to lie. It is so expensive to lie. Not just because it feels like, oh, I'll just tell this little white lie and it'll get me there faster, but it catches up to you quickly. And then it's, then you have to unravel it while you keep trying to move forward. And it's just very, very expensive to have to unravel a lie and keep your business moving. So expensive in time, in output, in fines, and everything. So the truth will set you free. Absolutely. I could go on, as you can imagine, about all these things. However, I've gone on for a while. And so if I look back in the last 20 years, one, I never thought we'd get here. It's amazing. Where is it? So I have, oops, it's on this shirt. 20, awesome. You might have a mug with that on it. And the mug's always wrong, right? It's always for left-handed people. Because, I already know that we're 20 years old. I don't have to see it. I really want other people to see it, but I'm not left-handed. It's very challenging. Anyway, 20 years, it's been amazing. Thank you to all of our clients who have trusted us. Thank you to all the people who have trusted me and Dan and our leadership team. It's very humbling. And I know as we move forward, things are going to keep changing. We're going to have to keep staying relevant. We have to keep relearning how to communicate. But I also know that the work that we do is more important than it's ever been, and that's not going to change. It's only going to increase, right? So if you're considering a job or a career in public relations or communications, this is a good one. You're going to learn so much. Even if you don't stay in a PR firm forever, you're going to learn so much that you can transfer to anything else. And when I think about how we move forward based on our goals of getting home by 6, helping our clients achieve their business goals, who are doing good things in the world and making the world a little bit better place, even in their small part of it, I am very confident, very optimistic that this is going to be a good thing. So thank you so much. Let me know what you think. Bye-bye.